Hello and welcome. I'm Barkha Dutt. You're with the Mojo Story. How did we reach a point where we're having a full-blown battle over whether namaz can be offered at a designated site in public? This is taking place not in some remote interior of India, but literally an hour from the national capital in the corporate business center of Gurugram. Let's take you through the big developments of this story that has fast become a huge political issue. Hindu groups of residents in Gurugram have objected to Muslim groups offering namaz in public. There are 37 designated sites, and in fact, this namaz had police permission. It has since been withdrawn at 8 of the 37 designated sites. The police says this is after complaints from local residents. In the meantime, a Govardhan Puja was organized at the site where Muslims were offering namaz, and contentious, controversial, inflammatory BJP member Kapil Mishra was also invited to speak at this event where Mr. Mishra invoked Shaheen Bagh, the citizenship protest, and said that if Hindus are pushed against a wall, this is how they will respond. A joint committee has been set up for residents to come together to find a solution, perhaps what should have been done to begin with. But the issue and the confrontation raises all sorts of not just socio-political but also legal questions. Let's focus on this in our special broadcast today, this high voltage battle over politics, religion, and how far the fundamental right to propagate and practice one's religion can go and should go. Introducing our guest today, we're joined by Dr. Khalid Ansari, who is a social scientist and works with the US-based advocacy group. Welcome to the program. Mohandas, a venture capitalist, business leader, educationist, is with us. Ashim Sood, well-known lawyer, is with us as well. And we're also joined by Hilal Ahmed. Hilal Ahmed is with the CSDS, is a social and political scientist. Hilal, I'll start with you. You have often taken positions that orthodox members of your community have disliked. But when you see this full-blown battle over namaz, and of course it's not over namaz, it's over offering namaz at a public space. What do you think? Do you think that there is a merit to the other residents saying, why do you have to do this in public? Or do you think that this has become an ugly spectacle that has made Muslim residents feel like second-class citizens?
Barkha, first of all, I have many communities. So my community is not only the
Fair
Muslim
enough.
community.
That is fair enough. And I stand corrected, but I said that in your introduction because often you have taken
Yes, I
positions
am. Yes, I
related
am.
to the place of Indian Muslims for which you have got
Yes,
galis from the
yeah,
clergy. So I just thought
yes,
it was important for our audience to know that. But go ahead.
absolutely, absolutely. Yes,
Yeah.
because I am not ashamed of my Muslim identity and at the same time my researcher identity. But the question you are asking, obviously, it's an important question, and we have to take a position where, some kind of a regulated, we have to think of this issue in its entirety. It is not a religious issue when it comes to public. So we have legally as well as morally certain principles to follow, and one of the principles is that if someone objects, I should not offer my namaz at that very spot. Having said that, I think it is also important because, especially with regard to this issue in Gurugram, I think we have to also recognize the ways in which this issue has become into a controversy. This transformation from issue to controversy is interesting because we have to also notice that Hindutva was completely unaware, or they did not have any interest in evoking the issue of namaz or describing namaz as an anti-Hindu issue. But look at the ways in which this particular practice has actually transformed into an anti-Hindu question. So I think there are three issues, three component of this issue, which we must address. First is that actually our urban spaces are designed in such a way that there is no space for religiosity. So on the one hand, we would like to have a space where everything is, we should have mall, we should have cinema hall, etc. But at the same time, we do not have any space for religious worship. That's one. I'm talking about the designed space.
Right.
Second is, things have changed completely in the last 30 years. Earlier, religious practices were confined to certain areas, but urban rural migration has transformed everything. Now you have got a significant migrant Muslim population, and they do not have any space to offer their Friday namaz. Third is changing religiosity. In last 30 years, the nature of religiosity all over India has completely changed. It is now public and it is now assertively displayed in public spaces. Therefore, these are the changes which have
So,
actually
do
taken
I
shape.
hear you
Yes.
say do I hear you say that urban spaces have not kept pace with the changing nature of society in a way, and that is one of the problems. And I take your point, but Mohandas Pai, let me bring you here. There could have even been a certain degree of relatability if this was not Hindus versus Muslims. What I mean by that is there could be Muslim residents also who could object to say, hey, why do you have to do this namaz in public? It's an interference with my peace of mind or my going about my business. The problem is when you start calling people like Kapil Mishra, who are known for hate speech, to these events, then you're signaling something else and you lose any basis to make this a civic issue. This could have been a civic issue. It's become a Hindu Muslim issue. Mohan.
Well, Barkha, my view is very simple. First of all, we should go by principles. Public spaces are for the public. And we should not have any of them doing prayers others in public spaces for all religions. Let's have the principle. Second, what this other person spoke about, designated places for worship, I think is a very important thing. I think all these people should approach the government to say, look, we have this challenge, give us designated places. It could be given for various religions and it can be part of the urban landscape. So they don't occupy a public space like a road or something else. And now, once you start occupying a public place, do it regularly, it is going to be a controversy. It's inevitable, Barkha. Politicians will come, the Muslim politicians will come and say, I will get it for you, I'll protect you. The Hindu politician will come and say, look, this is illegal, you do something. Remember what happened in Mumbai earlier? When the Muslims started doing namaz on the street, the Shiv Sena came and started doing puja. It is going to happen. I think we have to get together, we have to solve it. It's an issue for our citizens. Like the other gentleman said, I think the government should get together, call people together and have designated places because, we must allow all communities some kind of space within the urban agglomeration to do the religious practices. Right now, this is going to blow up even more. And I think occupying public places is not a thing. We are going to become an anarchic society. Let us have rule of law. Let us accommodate everybody. Let's have a dialogue and let the government do its act. And this cannot go on like this. So I think we have to get our act together. And Barkha, politicians will come, they will create controversy, whether it's a Hindu or a Muslim, because they want to vote, they want that constituency. It is inevitable. It's going to happen in any country. It's happened here.
But let me play out for you, Mr. Mohandas Pai, what Kapil Mishra said. This is just a little excerpt, and then I want you to respond to that. And that's my point. You're right that politicians from all sides will get into the argument. But as Hilal Ahmed said, when did it go from becoming an issue from a civic dispute to a Hindu-Muslim issue? That is the journey that we have to track. This is what Kapil Mishra said at the site.
देखिए, मैं केवल ये कहना चाहता हूँ कि हमको चाहिए आज़ादी, सड़कों पर चलने की आज़ादी, दफ्तर जाने की आज़ादी, अस्पताल जाने की आज़ादी, काम धंधा करने की आज़ादी, और ये आज़ादी भारत का संविधान हमें अधिकार के तौर पे देता है। तो इसीलिए सब लोग अपने अपने धर्म का पालन अपने अपने धार्मिक स्थलों में करें, यही सबके लिए ठीक है।
Now, Mr. Pai, when Kapil Mishra invokes Azadi, and in fact, some of his comments were much more inflammatory. How do you see those words?
No, I think it's inflammatory. I think Kapil Mishra as a political leader has to calm down and he has to get people together. I mean, accelerating divisions and doing this is not right. I think he's going the wrong way because we have to bring people together. And, prayer is important for all communities, whether you are a Sikh, Muslim, Hindu or a Christian, prayer is important. I think you must learn to accommodate. I think he's taking a very extreme, which is right. But Barkha, you must also remember that the agitation by citizens have been going on for some time. It's not something that happened today or yesterday. It's going on for the last 4 to 5 months. And government has not acted, government has not called them, and the government doesn't step in to solve problems. All kind of elements are going to come. It's inevitable. And they are going to have inflammatory comments. They're going to work it out. I think the government has failed in its duty to get people, the moment this controversy blew up, to get people together, have a dialogue, and give some space to everybody, as designated space. See, we have to accommodate each other. All of us have got to live in this country, right? This is our country. We got to accommodate each other to the maximum extent possible. Now, please remember, the Shaheen Bagh was a very, very bad thing, occupying a space for 1 year. The farmers squatting on the streets is telling people, you break the law, it is fine.
But Mohan, but Mohan, all great cities in the world, I'm in London right now, all democratic societies have designated spaces for the right to peaceful assembly and protest. Our cities must also have that. Citizens have a right to protest.
No, Barkha, I am all for the right to protest, but not the right to protest every single day and block roads. For example, on the Eid, we can block streets for people to do their prayers. On Diwali, we can block streets. It is for 1 day or sometime. It's not regular happening every week after week. We should not do that or continue for a year. You can do it for 1 day, 2 days, 1 week. That's fine because people are agitated. We have to accommodate. But it can't become like the farmers are doing for 1 year. That is unacceptable. Even the Supreme Court has come down on that. Let's agree on that.
Okay, let's park that and just take it to the panel. What happens when people's groups want to protest? But let's come back to the issue at hand. Dr. Khalid, let's bring you in.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a macro dimension and there is also a local dimension, a micro dimension to this debate. At the macro level, I think the consensus that was forged in South Asia, in Pakistan, in India, and in Bangladesh, I think that consensus is now being ruptured because of the hegemony of corporate capital in a neoliberal context. And the repercussions of this hegemony, they are being managed by muscular interpretations of religion across South Asia. So in India, it could be Hindutva, in Bangladesh and Pakistan, it is Islamism. And there is a cause and effect relationship, a symbiotic relationship between these developments. So that is at one level. And right now, I see the Hindu-Muslim binary as, I mean, one can frame this as a carrot and stick policy, where this new consensus is in the process of being forged. And at the macro level, the Hindu-Muslim binary is being used as a stick. And in this particular event, Kapil Mishra and the articulation of Owaisi, there's a particular spin in that form. At another level, the RSS is also trying to create a dialogue with the Muslims through their idea of Swadeshi Muslims.
Khalid, sorry, I'll come to the idea of the Swadeshi Muslim, but in my mind, every Muslim in India is a Swadeshi Muslim. But I see what you're saying. You're talking about it as a political construct. My question to you, Khalid, is this: is there a point at which there is a genuine civic issue? Like, had this been handled differently, could this have been treated as a legitimate civic issue? And I bring this up because I was remembering a fight that took place in the city of Mumbai over loudspeakers and azan. And you had many members of, prominent Muslims, Javed Akhtar was among them. It became a big talking point, saying that why do you have to do this on blaring loudspeakers? Now, this could be said about azan. It could also be said about, an early morning bhajan. It should be religion agnostic. There are issues that could be civic issues provided they're treated as religion agnostic. Khalid?
Yeah, I think in South Asia, I mean, we take our traditions and ancestral practices very seriously. And across communities, the large majority does not have a problem with that. It is only under particular circumstances and the larger political picture that I presented. It is in that larger political picture where these kinds of events emerge and erupt as controversies. For example, you were talking about azan or even various Hindu festivals and processions and the use of loudspeakers in those processions. An average Indian does not have a problem with that. There is a celebration of difference. If not celebration, at least there is a certain level of toleration. But it is the a small population within all communities, which basically is very hyper visible. It is very hyper vocal, and it feeds into this larger idea of muscular representations of religion when it becomes a controversy.
I think
And
what you say is very interesting, that there's a kind of hardening of religion, religious aggression, often by the dominant group. So in India, you locate it within Hindutva. In countries like Pakistan and Bangladesh, within a certain kind of Sunni Islam, not even Islam, because we see what's happening with the Shias, for example, in Pakistan. Ashim, legally, where are we here? It's also important to remind our audience, and Mohan, this is important, that they were designated sites with police consent where the namaz was being offered. The police has now withdrawn it from 8 of the 37 designated sites. I underline this because it is not as if Muslim residents had, without the permission or the supervision of the police, gone and kabza karod public spaces. But there is a kind of legal conflict here on how far the right to practice and propagate faith can and should go.
Well, I'm not sure what conflict exists, because the Constitution is very clear that you have the right to practice, profess, and propagate your religion, subject to certain exceptions. One of those exceptions is public order. But public order is not formulaic. It depends on the facts and circumstances. If there's no place to generally offer namaz, and the police decides that there is no problem with law and order if people are permitted to offer namaz in a certain designated public site, then obviously a call has been taken that public order is not being disturbed. Now, if somebody comes along and crosses certain limits of speech that begin to enter into the realm of hate speech and starts threatening violence, the question is whether public order is being disturbed by the people offering namaz, or whether public order is being disturbed by a third party. And certainly disturbance by a third party, an ex terrorum disturbance, a disturbance that puts the terror of violence, is not something that is usually justified to prevent somebody else from practicing, professing, and propagating their religion. So yes, of course, if there were enough designated areas, as Hilal Ahmed said a little earlier, there was a space for religiosity, or somebody came and encroached on public land without permission, that would be a public order issue. But here we have people who have been permitted to offer namaz, and somebody comes along the next day and threatens them, and then turns around and starts using the same space for purification rituals. So I'm not sure how much of this is really a conflict in law.
I know what you're saying, and I agree with you. But when I said conflict in law, I didn't mean this particular episode. I mean, for example, the issue over the azan and the loudspeakers went all the way to the Bombay High Court, right? So sometimes something can start as a dispute among residents. This is noisy. This causes me inconvenience. It could be that the Hindus, clinking their bells at a temple ceremony every Saturday. You have a lot of these shani mandirs, for example, could cause inconvenience to other Hindus and Muslims. That's where I suppose the gray areas enter. But I want you to think about that, because I think you said something very important. And Mohan, I want you to respond to this. To me, the public disorder is caused by calling people like Kapil Mishra. What did the Muslim groups do? They had police. Let me just ask a question. They had police permission. You can see the police in those shots as they're offering namaz. They're saying we have no other space. They're offering namaz with police consent. Namaz is part of their religious practice, the mass gathering. They don't have a designated space in that area. What do you think that they did wrong? And do you think that the signaling is terrible by calling people like Kapil Mishra?
Barkha,
do you not think that?
Barkha, people have been protesting about public spaces being used for the last many weeks. The government should have called them. No, the police allowed them to do it because people were not protesting earlier. People are protesting. They're finding it inconvenient now. You cannot put one set of people against other. You got to hear both sides. Now, if you occupy a public space, is inconveniencing me, I have a right to protest, and you must hear me out. You can't put me down. People have been going on. Nothing has happened. The government has not called them. The government has not allowed other places. There has been no dialogue. And when there's no dialogue, it continues. Then politicians step in, because what will the citizens do? You know that many women have been protesting for the last many weeks. You've seen it on TV. Government should listen to them also, because there are 2 points of view. First of all, public spaces should not be used for religion, any religion. Let's have a principle. If public spaces are to be used, it must be with consultation with all the people in the community, so they understand, they accommodate. Now, if police takes a unisided view for some period of time because others are not saying anything, keeping quiet, and it becomes too big, then it becomes a problem. Maybe the namaz was a small number of people. Now it's become very large. It's almost becoming a right. So we got to be careful. And when this blows up, politicians will come, it's inevitable. And they will have heated things. Look at this OIC talking something, OIC talks something, then Kapil Mishra will stop something. It is going to happen, Barkha. We have to solve the issue with the dialogue, and the government has to step in to make sure that, they come out with something acceptable to all people, because the public space.
Okay. Here's Let me just put Mr. Pai on mute and take this to Hilal. Hilal, here's the point. I think Ashim is correct in saying that if we frame this as a conflict, we are suggesting that this is more complex than it was. The police could have done the following. If there was a civic dispute, they could have done what they've done now. It's called a Mohalla committee. You create a group of residents, Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Christians, and you reach a consensus on maybe public spaces that can be used by all religious groups. After all, so many of our neighborhoods in India do have, for example, temples where people go once a week, and that is also a public space, because often you'll find that a part of that whole ritual is spilling over onto the streets, whether it's the giving of prasad, whether it's the lighting of candles. It happens in my own neighborhood in Delhi. Hilal? Yeah, I don't think Hilal has the best line. So let me take the same question to you, Khalid. What is the best way to deal with this when it happens, when residents complain?
No, I'm perfectly with Mohan Pai on this, in this argument on reaching a consensus with all the stakeholders and parties involved. But I have a problem with the legal argument. In South Asia, in India in particular, we know we negotiate with power in various ways, even in extra legal ways. For example, take the image of a street hawker. So a street hawker may not be allowed to sell his or her ware in Connaught Place, but he or she arrives at a particular kind of a consensus through the local political leader or through the police and the bureaucratic machinery and so on and so forth. So I think at the heart of the issue is the question of trust. So this legality argument, it needs to be parallelized, and it also needs to be interrogated. Because since the last so many years, this gesture of Muslims, this requirement for Muslims to offer a public prayer on Fridays, it was largely accepted in India, and there was never any problem. It is only in a particular circumstance where this public performance of prayer becomes a problem. And I think at the heart, there's a larger political dimension to it, and also there is a question of trust, which is eroding because of particular militant forms of religiosities.
I think that's actually a great point, and I want to bring in Ashim that this constant negotiation with power, and the street hawkers example is a superb example, because there'll be someone who'll pay a hafta to a cop, there'll be someone who'll pay a bribe, there's somebody who'll cajole, there's somebody who'll do something else, and it's a constant when institutions don't work as they should theoretically, that negotiation goes on. Yeah. Clearly here the police had consented to allow this to happen, maybe through that process of negotiation. How do you rescue a situation like this? Because there are fundamental rights of citizenship at the heart of this.
Yes. And I think I want to go back to something to what Mr. Pai said a little earlier, where he said public spaces should not be used for religion. Now, we're not that kind of secular country like France, where there's a concept of laïcité, where there is no religiosity. We are a very religious country. And to say that there's a difference between saying government buildings should not be used for religion and saying that public spaces should not be used. Public spaces have to be used for all purposes that are meaningful for the public. And I think that's what comes to your point. The point is that, is everyone getting equal access to these spaces, and is everyone getting the equal backing of the state in having access to these places? That's just what it comes down to. If the state is, whether overtly or for other sociological reasons, very clearly in favor of giving access to spaces to one community and not to the other, that's where the legal problem comes in. That has to be sorted out by courts. And again, this is not a question of peaceful protest. This is someone threatening to breach the peace rather than going to the courts and helping and using whatever legal means there are to do this. So
in your estimation, it's quite clearly the Muslim groups whose fundamental rights have been violated.
Well, I don't want to say whose rights have been violated, because I think that ultimately the state is the one that violates rights. And it's the state's job to ensure that rights are not violated. if a private party comes along and does this, then it's, according to me, that's just hooliganism and not a violation of rights.
Okay, fair enough. Let me. We do also have from the ground, the Muslim groups talking to us about what they're thinking and feeling at this time. But Hilal, I'm hoping your line is a little more stable. Go ahead. I know you've been listening to everybody. Go ahead.
Yeah, two things. One is that we need to actually problematize the whole idea of public, because we have multiple publics, not one kind of public. And the class question is very central here. Who these Muslims are? And remember that these Muslims are actually there to work. They are not the resident of these high posh colonies. They come, they pray, they go. Now, they do not have voice to raise their issues. And if that's a civic question, then we have to realize that who are these people and in what kind of agencies they have to assert themselves. That's one. Second thing is that actually, if you look at the various studies which we have been doing for a long time about changing religiosity, one thing is very and absolutely clear, that 90%, more than 90% Indians feel that if you don't respect other religion, that you are not true Hindu or true Muslim. And I'm not talking about 96, 97, I'm talking about 2021. This is the finding which Pew survey actually made. And if that is the case, then I am fully confident that these people are actually fringe people. They actually locate outside that. They come, they want to actually volatile the situation and to twist it into a communal situation. So therefore, my point, I'm actually making 2 points. One, we have to understand that actually there is a class question involved in that. There are elite and subaltern. Second, and most importantly, that Indian people actually, they assert their religiosity and they respect each other. And I think that's why I am very, I am not pessimistic. I'm very optimistic that this sort of issue can be solved if we evolve some kind of a consensus. But
Are you optimistic? Are you optimistic even after you see a Kapil Mishra being called here?
Yes, obviously, because there is a Indian rightist, especially Hindutva. They have reached a saturation point. I think they are facing a deep crisis. And we often talk about a crisis of secularism, etc. But in my view, it's actually the crisis of rightist, because now RSS has completely replaced by the ideology of Hindu Mahasabha. Hindu Mahasabha used to do exactly the same things in pre-independence days. So they are actually moving in that direction. And remember, Indian communities do not want fight. Muslims are not here only yesterday. They have been living in this country for 800 years.
I need to take last comments, but I just want to bring from the ground what the Muslim groups are saying to my colleagues at the Mojo Story. Let's listen it.
हमने ये कहा कि हम भाईचारे से समरसता से बात करेंगे। हमारी 19 मस्जिदें बंद हैं, अगर हमारी वो मस्जिदें खुल जाती हैं तो हम क्यों अपने भाइयों की बात मानेंगे, खुले नमाज पढ़ना बंद कर देंगे। हम तो गंगा जमुना तहजीब की मिसाल लेके आगे चलना चाहते हैं और उसी के लिए आज यहाँ पर सेक्टर 12 रेड लाइट पर आए हैं।
Now, Mr. Pai, this gentleman has not said anything that anyone can disagree with. He is saying my masjids are closed. He's saying my masjids are closed. If the masjids were open, we would not need to be here at this traffic light. We believe in the multiculturalism of India, and you can hear Jai Shri Ram slogans behind him when he's speaking. Why? I mean, if you were a Muslim in that colony, how would you feel?
Barkha, if I were a Muslim in the colony, I'll go with my leaders to the government and ask them, please open this mosque, please give me designated spaces. Then I will go to court to assert my right. I will not occupy any public space and do something else. I will work towards a consensus because I'm interested in a solution. I'm not interested in a fight. Now, please understand, this has been happening for some time. There have been protests for the last maybe 2 to 3 months, 4 months. Government has not done anything. When something is happening because of leave of the government, then there's a protest and people are against it. Then obviously you have to call both sides and to engage. The government does not engage and is spiraling out of control in this. Look at all these women. Why are they protesting? You think all of them are communal? Let's not blame one community, Barkha. It is a question of collective right. Let us get together.
Okay. Hilal, very quickly, Mr. Pai says that it's the government's fault for letting it simmer.
Very, very quickly. Basically, Punjab and Haryana Waqf Board is the richest Bakford in the country. And remember, these are Muslim properties. There are huge number of properties, especially mosque and other Waqf properties. They are actually encroached by private builders, by others, etc. And there are a number of court cases going on. That's one story. The second story, who these people are. These are poor people. They only want just 1 hour. And see, the elitist attitude which we have is that we are not ready to actually allow them to perform. And we are transforming, we are actually converting it into a communal question.
Yeah, I think the class dimension is something we haven't focused on enough. Khalid, before I give Ashim the last word, the class dimension is moot, because we don't know whether the response would have been different had these been middle class Muslims, let's say.
Yeah, obviously, and that is a very important point that Hilal raised. Most of these are working class Muslims who are migrant labor. They also come from lower caste, lower class backgrounds. And look at their narratives. Their narratives, on the one hand, they stand in they are very accommodative, they are very dialogic, and they stand in contrast with the narrative of Kapil Mishra at one hand, and also it could be contrasted with the intervention of a person like Owaisi, a politician like Owaisi. So in Mishra's narrative and Owaisi's narrative, there is a muscular interpretation of religion. And in the narrative of these local Maulanas, the local Imam, the understanding of religion is much more accommodative. It is much more dialogue.
I think that's a great point. And sorry, Ashim, I want to come to you, but I just want Mohan to comment on that. The fact is that these Muslim groups are not just in contrast to the politics of Kapil Mishra, they're also in contrast to the politics of Asad Owaisi. I think that's a really important point.
Almost all Indians want to live in peace. They don't want conflict. Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, everybody wants to live in peace. You don't want conflict. We've been living together for 800,000 years. The great majority of people are peaceful. Whenever there's a conflict, we must create mechanisms where they come together, discuss, and dissuade everything. Now, when your conflict goes on and simmers, obviously politicians are going to come from all sides because politicians want to divide people. They want to rouse emotion. It's going to happen, right? So we need to create this mechanism like your Mohalla committee or whatever to get people together. Barkha, let us accept one thing. The great majority of people of this country of all faiths want to live together in peace and are very happy to live together. They don't want to fight. That is a fact. Small number want to fight because for political reason they want to arouse emotions. We got to isolate them and we got to create mechanisms where all these conflicts don't simmer.
Unfortunately, and I'll give the last word to Ashim, it is that aggressive, militant, muscular aggression that is able to vocalize any narrative and any argument today increasingly. And that's where institutions have to step in to protect the rights of citizens. Ashim, are you somewhat dismayed that the police withdrew its permission at 8 of these 37 sites? They could, of course, claim that, public disorder was under threat and they have to manage a kind of complicated situation in their minds. Last word to you.
I can't say I was dismayed because I feel like in situations like these, a police force acting in good faith probably has to bring out some kind of balancing act. So one way to look at it is that they probably balanced it for both sides. What I do think is that ultimately, if there was a Vishal Jagran being done at this site, we could not see a bunch of Muslim protesters standing outside legitimately and being allowed to get away with a lot of this. And that's where the true discrimination comes in. The gentleman you showed on your screen a moment ago, there was a hint of apology in what he said, probably coming from experience. And that's how minorities around the world live, whether racial or religious. They have to be apologetic and accommodative. And the fact of the matter is that what I am dismayed with is that if somebody is doing something within the confines of the law, there should be no hint of apology for doing it. So that's really what dismays me.
And also, what are the avenues open to them? Because when we underline the poverty, we can't really expect these groups now to be petitioning the court. These are local administrative matters that need to be resolved locally.
That's precisely the problem. They don't have the firepower to do that. So they are at the mercy of all the local authorities and the rabble rousers, and they have to be accommodative. Of course, there is public interest litigation, but they may not be a popular enough cause for a lot of people to undertake. So,
And I think that's sad, and I think that underlining that hint of apology in that Muslim gentleman's elderly Muslim gentleman's articulation is something that should make us all extremely uncomfortable, because as Mr. Pai, you yourself said, the majority of Indians do want to live cheek by jowl, allowing space for each other's religious practices, and that we cannot work this out at a hyper local level without calling outsiders, inviting politicians, becoming a Hindu versus Muslim issue. Is not the USP of this country. It is the exact opposite. It is the exact contrast to what makes us Indian. So hoping really for a better resolution to this. Thank you, Hilal, Khalid, Ashim, and Mohandas Pai, and to our audience. See you tomorrow, same time. Thank you for watching. Goodbye. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.